Do you think George Russell has a serious threat on his hands? Because when we left Australia, I thought it looked like it could be Russell's championship to walk. He doesn't even have the championship lead anymore.
Yeah, I think George is under pressure, isn't he? And it's great to see this young character come through, someone that Mercedes have backed and worked with over the years. They threw him in at the deep end, replacing Lewis Hamilton. Big shoes to fill. And we have to say that, his results last year were fairly mixed. But coming into this year, it was a reset, I think. And he's shown mental strength. And I think it's been really encouraging. It's vindicating everything that Mercedes has been telling us about this this young driver that's popped up, and it's great to see. Look, and I think that the more drivers we have in a championship fight, the better. I mean, we'll come on to it, but a podium containing different names is always great, and good to see the teams fighting there. Again, rather than just this one horse race, it should keep it interesting for us.
Yeah, I've followed Kimi for quite a few years because I've been doing a lot of the junior single-seater stuff as well. So I was watching some of those Italian F4, ADAC F4 races a little bit, but then in particular I saw him in Freca years ago. Ironically, not a weekend where he won, but he was very, very bloody quick. And then, yeah, this skip of you thinking, let's not do F3 and then going straight into F2 with quite, from the way I saw it, quite a mixed campaign, but not from his not out of his control, is what I'm trying to say, because that year
Yeah.
the regulations changed so much and he went with what would be the equivalent of Mercedes for this year in Formula 2, Prema, who really struggled to get on top of the new regulations. Seems like a familiar story in certain ways. However, Kimi seemed to do pretty well. Last year, though, I did think at certain points, maybe is a little bit fresh-faced coming in. It seemed to be like he was destined to be there. When I've spoken to him in the past before he ever joined F1, he seemed very comfortable in his own skin for the amount of pressure that was on him. And this now seems to be the second season, the sophomore season seems to be the culmination of what we all expected from the junior single-seater world of this is going to be the new GOAT. This is going to be the Max Verstappen beta. I just didn't expect it to happen this soon. And these two races, I really think he could be swinging the team around to him, which when you look at how George Russell has been and how long he's been waiting in the sidelines, that could be a critical flaw in his hopes of becoming a World Drivers' Champion.
I think Mercedes will row down the middle, won't they? They'll do the best to pacify both drivers. They've been pretty good at that in the past and trying to maintain the harmony. I always think of the Rosberg-Hamilton scenario, but since then it's been kind of manageable. There's not been too many conflicts between the two drivers. So I anticipate that to be the same. I think Kimi will remain the underdog because of the experience and the wobble that he had last year. But I do think that those interesting results last year, when we hit the European season, were quite strange, weren't they? I mean, it was Imola where he had all the pressure and, the home race, the first race in F1. I think the team didn't do a very good job on shielding him from all the attention and maybe overloaded him perhaps with some sponsor commitments and whatnot. And he didn't really recover until we got to the flyaway. So that was a big chunk of the season that cost him. All eyes will be on, once we return to Europe again, whether that form comes back to haunt him or whether he's learned his lesson. I'm really curious as to, from your perspective, someone that's followed his career, what would you say are his strengths as a driver? Because at the moment, he's wonderfully naive, blisteringly quick, incredibly likable. But what is it that you would have down as his top strength?
Not to promote other podcasts, there's certainly ones that are years old, but I remember listening to Marcus Armstrong's podcast, who's now gone off to IndyCar and racing in America, and he was in F2 at the time, and I remember a podcast that he had, Screaming Meals it was called, but he said he was on track at Maranello doing some sort of banker lap to get these kids who want to do the Ferrari Driver Academy program to see what sort of lap time they should be aiming for. And he said, I told the mechanics, make sure it's fresh tires for me and a light fuel load so I can really show them up, that sort of thing. But he said in that podcast, words that have always stuck with me. that you don't need to put the kids in the car to know who's fast. It's just about how they are when you see them. Do they have confidence? Are they too cocky? Are they too unconfident? That sort of thing. Kimi was so sure of himself in the most settled way, similar to what I saw with Oscar Piastri, and we've seen how good he is, that the main strength was who he was, not necessarily on the racecraft and everything, but like he had so much attention on him. He had hundreds of thousands of followers as a 16-year-old because of this Mercedes backing, because people were saying this is the future for Verstappen, so get in now. Like when you hear about a new band or something and you want to get there before they're selling out and getting headlines at Glastonbury or whatever, that's what Kimi had. And he was going to school and he was getting so much attention and he was taking it in his stride. And now he's an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, leading the world championship in Formula One, and he doesn't seem to be overwhelmed by it. And that, I think, is what his key strength is. It doesn't have to necessarily be racecraft or his qualifying times or outright pace or anything like that, because that all comes, you can train that, but you can't train how to handle that sort of mentality. Maybe there were a few wobbles, maybe there were a few too many things. Because you've seen his exams, if you remember, as well, that he had to juggle at the same time. Yeah. And then he still ends up, grabbing a podium here and there, doing well. And now, 1 year later, you get through that difficult first season, and we're seeing exactly what the future might hold for Mercedes.
To have two Mercedes homegrown drivers in that team is something that the team and Toto Wolff especially can feel really proud of. And I think that all just comes through with the confidence in the team. The only other thing I was going to say is that Antonelli's attitude is very similar to Ollie Behrman. The thing that impressed Haas the most was that when he was coming in for his test days at Haas on loan from Ferrari, they asked him to work for a program and he did it. He didn't try to put in those flying laps and try and stun everyone and prove how good he is. He just got in and did the job, and they were suitably impressed by that rather than trying to show off and get a bit too ahead of himself. I guess that maturity is something that we are seeing now in these younger drivers, which is great, isn't it? Great for the sport. And those old guys like George Russell have got to be looking over their shoulders.
Yeah, the young driver programs are very impressive at the moment. I do think we're seeing such high quality in the entire field. There's not really any driver out there which you can really point to and say you're out your depth, you shouldn't be here, because I think every one of the 22 at the moment has earned a place to get there. They've gone through the ranks, and Kimi and maybe Ollie Behrman, because I think both of us really appreciate how good he is, are the ones of the flag wavers at the moment to say, look how good young drivers are. But I mean, you look at Hadjar in the Red Bull at the moment, you look at Lindblad going into Racing Bulls, remembering he's got 3 races under his belt. Colapinto never raced at Suzuka, which I think a lot of people have actually forgotten as well because of his unusual start in Formula One. The future's bright for Formula One. Let us know who you think is the strongest young star in the comments below.